Thank you so much. Wow, okay. Let's get this going. Figuring out sponsored contributions. So, to start this off, I'd like to ask anybody who has ever contributed to WordPress to please stand up. Awesome. All right, I'd like to hear a round of applause for all of these amazing people for making WordPress what it is. Please stay standing, though, because the follow-up to this is, please continue to stand if you are not currently sponsored or fully employed to contribute to WordPress. Okay. So this is kind of a good sign, is that it seems like we're sponsoring a lot of individuals, at least in the sample size of this room. But I think we can definitely do better. The stats show that we can do better. We can be sponsoring the people who build WordPress for our companies and our agencies and organizations to survive on. And so that's the purpose of this talk, is to figure out how to get more sponsorships, more effective sponsorships into the WordPress project. And so I'm talking today to two primary groups. The first one is organizations and companies who rely on WordPress to be a company. So this is hosting companies, this is agencies, plugins. And what I'm hoping to do is give you a framework to approach your leadership with reasons why you should be sponsoring contributors. The second group I want to talk to today is the contributors. I want to hopefully teach you some ideas and some methods to talk to companies and ask for sponsorship in an effective way. So let's figure this out and we'll dive right in. And my hope is I'm going to leave plenty of time for Q&A at the end, so get your questions ready as I'm talking. So we have kind of two conflicting worlds here. We have open source, WordPress project, which is all based on community coming together to work on software in public. And then we have closed source businesses whose primary function is to generate revenue, income, and be able to pay their employees, keep the lights on, and provide services to their customers. And we need to bridge a bit of a gap here because typically in open source, we don't think about return on investment. We don't think about profit. But in order to get that funding in there, we need to talk to these organizations who think that way. And so typically, the open source software pitch goes something like, you should contribute to open source software because it's the right thing to do. It's an ethical argument, and I have nothing against this argument. It's accurate, and I believe it to be true. We should be giving back to what allows us to make a living. The issue with this pitch is that as a company is concerned, it doesn't fly, right? Like that just doesn't compute in the terms of three really important letters, which is ROI, return on investment. That's how companies operate, that's how they think. And for good reason. If they don't operate and think that way, they don't stay a company for very long. I'll speak from experience trying to run my own company. If you're not bringing in revenue, you don't get to keep operating. And so I think the fundamental thing we need to shift when we're looking for sponsored contributors or sponsored contributions is changing our frame of mind in terms of what is the return on investment for a company to give you money to contribute to WordPress. And so we have, when it comes to ROI, it's very clear as far as using open source software, using WordPress, right? As a host, I host WordPress, I'm able to charge people for that. So the return on investment there is very clear. As an agency, I use WordPress to build a website, I charge for that website that I've created. Makes total sense. Where the struggle comes in is, what is the ROI of contributing to open source software? How can we talk to businesses about that? And so my goal is to give you some frameworks to think about this, convey this to leadership and executives so that they can start thinking of this in more practical reasons for contributing. So I've broken this down into three sections. There's strategic reasons, operational, and second order. So strategic reasons are pretty straightforward. we rely on WordPress to operate our companies. So we need to fund WordPress so that it stays around and keeps working. But we can go further than that, and we can be very strategic about it. So if we think in terms of a hosting company, there's two main areas that we're really interested in as far as the WordPress project goes: performance and security. We want the WordPress to perform optimally so that we don't have to pay for as much CPU to operate the websites. That increases margin. When it comes to agencies, we want it to be very usable. We want it to be accessible, not only for when we're building the website, but when we hand it off to the clients, we want them to be able to use the website. And so from a strategic perspective, investing in those areas will make a lot of sense. One term that I've seen kind of thrown around, or one concept I've seen thrown around, is commoditizing your complement. So the complement here is WordPress. It's what all of us use across the industry to make our products and our services work. We should be thinking about commoditizing that and making that so that it's just something like a utility that we utilize. When you're talking with business people, they love statistics. And so I've added one here that I came across recently. This was a study done by Nagel in 2017. He's an economist. He was hired by the Linux Foundation to determine what's the economic value of open source software. And in that report, one interesting thing they came out with was it's over $9 trillion, and this is just for like the top open source projects in an enterprise world. But I really like this statistic, is that companies that contribute to open source software see a 2x increase in value over free riders. What the heck does that mean? That's crazy. Okay, hey, wait, it's free software. How can you have an increase in value? Well, as you're contributing to WordPress, you're getting to know it better. Even if you're sponsoring a contributor outside of your organization, you're communicating with that contributor. You're finding out, what's coming next in WordPress. What are some challenges happening? And so you're beginning to understand the software better, and you can now incorporate that further into your strategic goals as a company. So there's your strategic reasons, and there's a lot to expand on there, but in the sake of time, we'll move into the operational. So if you have a software developer on staff, it means you're a software company. And if you're doing that work, you understand that every time you create software, you've created technical debt for your organization. You now have to maintain that software. And the problem with that is it prevents you from creating new software. One of the advantages of contributing to open source software is you're offloading that technical debt onto the open source project, which creates the feedback loop of now needing to contribute more to the open source software to maintain what you've given it, but you've now also distributed that maintenance to the rest of the project. And so if you're talking to anybody technical in an organization, bring this up. This should immediately get their attention. Oh, wow, if I can reduce technical debt, we can work on new things. We can reduce costs of operation. So really important here from a practical standpoint. And then the third practical reasons to bring up are second order benefits. And this is a really large area of topic to talk about and bring up. So at a very basic level, it's just having conversations with people who are contributing to WordPress. Like I mentioned, as you're talking with these contributors and developers, you're learning more about where the project's going, any challenges it's having, but it's also helping you learn more about maybe software development in general. You have code reviews. If you are actually contributing code into open source software, all of the contributors are going to give you feedback on your code, and that's going to help you within your organization. There's mentoring, and this goes both ways. So you can be mentoring people in the project, and vice versa, they can mentor you. Networking, here we are at this amazing event. Of course, we're having zero fun here. This is serious business only. But the networking effect, and just learning what's going on, finding new business partners, maybe finding employees. And then the final second order benefit to talk about is brand recognition. And I mentioned this last for a reason. This should be kind of an afterthought. I would not lead with brand recognition as the reason to contribute, but this does happen. Just by focusing on contributing and helping the project, the people that you're sponsoring are immediately going to recognize your brand as helping the project, and then the word's going to get around. So second order benefits are another really good practical reason to bring up when you're talking with leadership. Another one to talk about is risk aversion. So open source is infrastructure. We rely on it. If WordPress doesn't work well or it isn't maintained, then we have problems as organizations that are using it to rely on it. So talking about risk aversion, if you're contributing to the product that your business is relying on, you're helping to reduce risk. Businesses are very risk averse, so this is a really good point to bring up. So those are the practical reasons to start thinking about sponsoring contributors. Now we want to talk about the different ways that you can sponsor contributors to WordPress. And there's two main paths I want to focus on here. Of course, sponsored contributors is the main one that I'm talking about. But another option is to hire an employee who is going to work full-time on the project. Both of these have pluses and minuses, and I'll kind of go into those. So the first one is sponsoring contributors. The main advantage here is that you're keeping it very simple. There is much lower commitment here in terms of dollar value, in terms of time value. You can get this set up much faster. You're not hiring somebody on full time and having to deal with all of that. And it's also very community driven. This can be just really quick and easy. The drawback is you're not going to necessarily maybe get as in-depth touch points because it's not your employee. You can't really tell them exactly what to do. And you might not be giving them as much insight into your company's strategic goals. The other method of contributing is to hire somebody who's going to work full-time on this. I don't know why I chose this image for an employee, but it seemed interesting. When you're employing somebody to contribute, this is a much longer term investment. You're going to definitely spend probably more money here. But the advantages are you have easier integration into your company's product roadmap and potentially creating more sustainable change. The footnote caveat that I want to add here is that one is not necessarily better than the other. I know a lot of sponsored contributors who have no interest in becoming an employee. They choose to have a lifestyle of being a sponsored contributor, and that works just fine. So I do not see one as being better than the other here. They're just different ways of approaching this. For this presentation, I'm focused on sponsored contributors because I'm really focused on getting more organizations sponsoring contributors, and that's the easiest way to do it. So we've gone through practical reasons for sponsoring. We've gone through some different ways of actually sponsoring individuals. Now we want to start crafting our internal pitch. And so again, I'm talking to two groups here. I'm talking to people working in organizations, even leading the organization, but I'm also talking to the contributors so that when you're approaching organizations, this is a good way to approach it. So there's three main points here that I want to cover is understanding the organizational goals, being patient, and then being ready, and then finally some common objections. Hopefully I'm not flying through here too fast. So the first one is understanding your organization's priorities. And I have a table full of sticks here that look like you're pitching something. I don't know. But what you want to think about here is we've covered practical reasons that are pretty far-reaching, strategic, operational, and second order. Now we're getting into the nitty-gritty. And we've covered some of this already. So if you're a hosting company, you want to talk to your leadership about performance benefits, security. If you're an agency, you're focused on accessibility, UX, and for all of us, there's documentation, there's training. These are all important aspects for using WordPress, not only as in our organizations, but also the clients that we're building stuff for. And so the more that you can craft that pitch specific to the organization, the easier you're making it for them to understand what these benefits look like. The second part here is being patient, but also being ready. So executives are hopefully very busy people. They're making decisions all day long. They're trying to figure out a bunch of things going on with their organizations. Giving money to something that they don't have to pay for is going to be very low on their priority, at least when you're first bringing it up to them. So you need to be patient with this, but you also need to be ready, because as soon as an executive makes a decision, they're going to want to start seeing results as quickly as you can. And so you're going to want to have everything lined up and ready to roll, and that's the next part of the talk, is I'm going to explain how to start finding contributors and onboarding them. But the key term I want to bring up here is budget. Nothing is happening until you have gotten a budget to do this. And this is really important to think about, because you don't want to start getting a contributor excited about sponsorship and then to tell them, sorry, I don't actually have any money to give you. So at this point, if an executive comes to you and says, all right, let's go, your first question should be, great, what's the budget? And how do we want to distribute that? How is this all going to work? Get that worked out at the very beginning, and it'll be much less messy at the end. And then common objections, right? You're going to get pushback. You're giving money for something that you don't have to pay for. If you don't get pushback, that should be a warning sign. So the first one's going to be, what's the ROI? And we've covered this quite a bit, but it's good to rehash it. So again, it's shared infrastructure. We rely on this software to actually operate. We want to think strategically. We want to think about operations, second order benefits. All of this you should be ready to communicate as soon as they bring it up. Another common objection is, what if the contributor goes rogue? The first thing to remind them of is that this is open source software. Just because you've committed something to happen does not mean it's going to be accepted. We have core contributors, for lack of a better word, gatekeepers, that prevent you from just publishing whatever you want into core. And so there's safety checks for that. So the risk is pretty low there. But this is also where something to bring up is maybe a contract is important for the organization. And if that is, I'm going to talk about how to kind of navigate that here in a little bit. But that's a response you might want to bring up. And then a final, big common objection is, we don't have the time to manage this. And the good news is that's why you're doing a sponsored contributor instead of bringing on an employee. The sponsored contributor should be a low maintenance situation. I'm going to go into how to think about that as you're evaluating them shortly. But that's going to be important to make sure you're evaluating well so that you avoid having an issue with this. But the answer is, this is why we're doing sponsored contributor over employing somebody. Is everybody following so far? Are we doing pretty good? Excellent. Okay, so we've explained practical reasons. We've figured out if we want to do sponsored contributors or employee. We've made the pitch. We've gotten budget. Now we need to start finding the right contributors to sponsor. And so there's 3 areas here that I like to focus on. There's searching, evaluating, and then connecting. So searching for a contributor, this is actually the easiest part of the whole process. Because WordPress is a community, and the whole point of open source software is for people to come together to help each other writing software, all you need to do is reach out to the community and ask. And you will get lots of recommendations. My advice is, here where I've seen success, is reaching out to employed contributors, employed core contributors. They tend to have less conflict of interest because they shouldn't be looking for sponsorship. They should be okay with what they've got as an employee. But they're working with people in the project. They're able to identify who's doing good work, who's doing mentoring work, and who should really get help for continuing to do that work. So reaching out to the community is a great step here. And again, now you're starting to get those second order benefits. You're engaging with the WordPress community. Even if it's someone you're not going to directly sponsor, you're starting those conversations, you're networking. Another great opportunity is going to Contribution Day at a WordCamp and talking to team leads. And they should also have a great idea of who on the team might need some help and again is doing good work. So that's searching, that's finding somebody. Honestly, that's the easiest part. For you contributors out there, I want to point out that I have only found contributors by looking for them. No one has ever approached me. So I'm hoping that I'm reaching you with this conversation. I also want to caveat, I want to talk with you all, but I will say I don't currently have any budget currently. So just prefacing that. However, there's lots of organizations here who do have budget. I'm hopefully teaching you how to approach them. Absolutely. All right. So now we want to evaluate the contributor. There's a lot of things we want to find out because again, inside of the organization, your leadership should be expecting some sort of reporting about what's going on. Where's this money going? How's it being used? And so one of the things that we've done is we've created a very simple intake form that we ask the contributor to fill out and give us an idea of, what are they working on? What have they worked on in the past? What do they want to work on next? And giving us an idea, how many hours are they looking to work for? What rate are they looking for? Like starting to really figure out all the nitty-gritty here. After this intake form, you should be pretty much ready to sponsor them or not. But I like to go one step further, and I'm really about connecting, and I know that's the next slide, but I'm really about connecting with the contributor. I want to get to know who they are as a person, what's motivating them to work on the project, because that's going to tell me a lot of things going back to that what if they go rogue problem. I want to avoid that from happening at all costs. So connecting with the contributor, learning who they are, and what's driving them should help get rid of any of those concerns. Another thing that you're learning at this point is their communication capabilities and skills. If they're on the other side of the planet from where you live, there's going to be a delay in responses. You should expect that. If that's not going to work for you or your organization, make sure you're taking that into consideration. Maybe you want to start with somebody more local first and get that evaluated and make your leadership feel more confident in all of this. Are they good at communicating on Slack? Are they communicating on email? Figure out where's the best way that works for them. Again, we want them spending most of their time contributing to WordPress, not managing the relationship with you. Another point here for evaluating is alignment with your values, not just your product goals, but your values as a company. Is this person's going to be representing you? When they're working in the project, they're going to let people know that you're sponsoring them. Are they a good representative of your organization? Consider this. The WordPress community is fantastic. I've never run into an issue with this, but you want to be thorough here. And then the final one for evaluation is, are they a mentor? Are they a multiplier? Are they unblocking people that are working in the project? That's what excites me almost the most about sponsoring a contributor, is finding one who is going beyond just their contribution to the project, but helping others. Because we need more people coming into the project. We need new people coming into the project. So I look for this in a major, major way. And usually the people that are referred to me are mentors. And then another one here is connecting. We've kind of covered this a little bit. They unblock others. They're maintaining critical infrastructure. Evaluating here still. One of the things I like to look for is that they lead with kindness, and they're consistent, that they're working on the project. All right, we're doing great here on time. So now we want to talk about getting the rubber to hit the pavement. How do we get the sponsored contributor paid and make this stuff all work? And there's a lot of resources out there. I have not really covered the additional organizations that exist in the space, but there's a ton of them out there to help with this as well. I've pointed out a couple of things that has worked for us. And so the easy route is going with a GitHub sponsorship or Open Collective. So pretty much anyone who's a developer should have a GitHub profile. It's very easy for them to go to their sponsor page and create either a set amount that they're looking for sponsorship, or maybe they have an open-ended. Open Collective is very similar. With Open Collective and GitHub, it's very simple. You sign up, you put in your credit card, and it's done. So easy, quick, just get things done. The more formal route is if you're probably a larger organization, you have a legal and a finance team, unless you love having to do extra work. And so what we're looking at here is vendor onboarding, some sort of a light contract that usually covers something like non-disparagement, intellectual property clauses. I am not a lawyer. I want to make sure that that is clear. If you have legal questions, consult with a lawyer on this. This is how we operate pretty much all of our sponsorships, and it gives our internal teams a sense of security, which is important in our case, but I think also it helps the contributor feel like, hey, wow, this is a really legitimate situation. I need to do good work. You know, I want to keep the sponsorship going. So definitely more formal, a little bit more costly, but you know, might be where you want to end up. There are, again, organizations that can help with all of this as well. So there's a nice in-between. I didn't really cover that on this conversation. The important thing, and I'm using this slide 2 times, is to keep it simple. A sponsored contributor is not an employee. Again, I'll repeat, a sponsored contributor is not an employee. You should not expect them, don't give them over onerous expectations. Like if they're writing, you know, you want them to write a 10-page report. No, no, no. You want them to be on a weekly stand-up call. Probably not great. I mean, again, you're taking them away from working on the project. You should be focused on getting them to work on WordPress as much as possible and dealing with you as little as possible. So keep it simple. Highlight your contributors. Celebrate your contributors. At the beginning of this talk, I had contributors stand up, got applause. I'm sure that felt really great for the contributors. It's the same thing if you write a blog post, if you do a video interview with them, if you put them in a newsletter, give them recognition. That goes a long way at making them feel appreciated. Also, it's highlighting the project. So you're highlighting the work that they're doing, but you're also highlighting what's happening with WordPress and sharing that with the community, and maybe hopefully getting other people interested in contributing. I'd like to do a lot of video interviews myself. I did one recently with Aaron Jorbin where we did a bug scrub. He actually walked me through my first bug scrub, and my hope with that video is to show people you can probably do better. So it's not terribly hard, but you know, you can do this. So anyway, highlighting the contributors. This is a really fun part of sponsoring contributors, and I highly recommend it. Again, your brand recognition is a secondary effect in this case. So put that to the side, focus on the WordPress project, focus on the contributor, the rest will follow. Lessons learned. What have I learned? So it's been 8 months, 8 months that we've been sponsoring contributors. And I think the first thing that I've learned is don't wait, start as soon as possible. Go to a GitHub sponsor option, find one contributor, give them some cash, check it out for 3 months, see how your leadership team feels about it, and then expand it from there. But just don't wait, start now. We need this as soon as possible. Open source software in general needs more contributions, needs more sponsorship. WordPress needs this. We all rely on WordPress. We should be pushing this pedal to the metal. Don't discount the effects on brand and goodwill. Again, I considered that all secondary effects. It's still low on my priority list, if not on my priority list for this project, but it happens, and it happens really quickly, and it's really amazing, and it's awesome. The WordPress community, word gets around. You know, everybody talks to each other here. So don't discount that, don't focus on it, but it does happen. Also, be ready to be surprised and learn new things about the WordPress project itself. learn more about yourself and what you're interested in and how you can contribute to WordPress. You don't have to be a developer to contribute to the project. We have amazing volunteers here making WordCamp US happen. Thank you to the volunteers. They're contributing to WordPress. So those are some lessons learned. I've got some more. Happy to talk more about that. Wrapping up, my call to action is, don't wait, start now. We need people. Open source software is absolutely reliant on the people that contribute to the software. It doesn't happen without the contributors. So we need to be sponsoring them. We need to figure out how to get them more sponsorship, and we're all going to benefit from this. So rising tide lifts all boats. There's competitors to WordPress right now. We need to not be resting on our laurels. We need to be pushing ahead with all of this. Start small, but you need to start. Start the conversation inside of your organization today, even if it's just with your immediate manager. Start talking about this stuff. Hey, what do we do to actually contribute back to WordPress? And see what the answer is. Maybe you're already doing stuff, you're not aware of it. And that means that you guys should be highlighting it and letting at least people inside your company know about it, but definitely the rest of the world. If you're a contributor, start reaching out to organizations. I mentioned it earlier. None of the people we're sponsoring came to us. We reached out to all of them. I don't have a problem with that, but that's an indicator that contributors could be doing more to reach out. And what I'm hoping with this conversation is giving you tools to be effective in your outreach. Just reaching out with the ethical argument for contributing to open source software can work, but it'll be more effective if you're talking about ROI. If you're talking business talk to these organizations, it'll just happen much faster. Sponsor one contributor for a few months, learn from it. And yeah, if your company runs on WordPress, you're already standing on the shoulders of volunteers, so maybe it's time to hold them up. My name is Roger Williams. I do partnerships and community at Kinsta. That is my LinkedIn QR code. Connect with me there, leave comments. We have 10 plus minutes for questions and answers. I'd love to hear some questions. I just want to remind you, I don't currently have budget, but I want to talk with all of you. I want to talk with all of you, and like I said, there's a lot of organizations just across the hall who do have budget, so go and get to them. But thank you very much, and if you do have questions, there's a microphone in the middle of the room. I'm directing you to that.
Earlier slide, why do you separate open source versus closed source? Having the money, I'm thinking Red Hat or many large open source corporations that have a premium version, like every WordPress plugin on the WordPress pages is GPL and open source, and there's a lot of paid add-ons, premium add-ons. Why is it necessarily that they're separated two categories, open source and then closed source, which is making money? I don't think there's any company that's entirely one or the other.
Is there a question?
Yes. Yeah, why are those separated?
Okay, great question. So for the framing of this conversation, my point there is that, so you've got WordPress.org, which is the open source project for WordPress. There is a foundation there, there's money that goes into it, but none of that money is necessarily distributed to the contributors. The contributors are all volunteers. So what we're trying to do is convince the companies who generally operate in a more closed source when it comes to the business side of it, and are more focused on revenue, and getting them to convince themselves to give money to the volunteers who are building open source software. Mm-hmm. It's fuzzy, it's not a completely black or white situation, but that was used for illustrative purposes to kind of frame businesses versus open source and getting them to think more together.
Yeah. And from on a individual person with a GitHub account, GitHub sponsors is a good way to connect with them?
So there's a lot of different ways to reach out and connect with contributors. You can reach out through GitHub. Personally, I like to connect over email or Slack, or eventually get that conversation moved to a different method. GitHub is, I'm not necessarily as comfortable using GitHub for communication. If you are, go for it.
Okay, thank you.
You're very welcome. Thanks for the question.
Hi, Roger. Nate from Kinsta.
Hey, buddy.
One thing that struck me during your talk is how would you feel about the risk side of this equation? So if I was in the room, what would you say to someone that's afraid to talk about sponsoring contributions to WordPress with their employer?
Yeah.
And how did you think about that at Kinsta?
Oh, wow. So if you're afraid to talk to your employer, that's a different issue. You might want to find a better employer. Hopefully you can have conversations like this. And honestly, you want to approach it with a sense of curiosity, right? Like, don't come barging in. Like, again, that's why I'm moving away from just the ethical argument where generally that's like a hammer of, hey, you need to give back. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that argument. I agree with it. But that's definitely more of the stick, right? We want to be leading with the carrot. And the carrot is, how does this benefit the business? So spend some time understanding your organization and what its priorities are and how sponsoring WordPress, in this case, will benefit that. My experience was, everybody inside of Kinsta has been open to the conversations. The challenge is priorities. Right? As a business, there's a lot of priorities usually around making money and reducing spending money. This is a spend ask, so it's a cost center. And so you need to be aware of that and realize that that's going to have it should have a lower priority if you're working at an effective business. An effective business should be focused on revenue coming in. So again, patience. I would say it took about a year from really starting this conversation until we got budget approval. So just to set your expectations, again, that being patient but being ready part is really critical.
Cool. And I would echo that, like just the way that you approached it, and like I would definitely say that like one of the things that I think you did a good job of striking good balance on was like being patient, but yet keeping the conversation going. So I thought
Absolutely.
that was awesome. Last question. And I'll turn the microphone over. Is there any way that you QA contributions, or does the community sort of monitor the contributions of the people that Kinsta's sponsoring? How does that work?
Yeah, really great question. And this is, I would say, phase 2 of our sponsored contribution project. And I've actually had some contributors bring this up of, hey, what do you want me to work on? And usually I'm like, great, you're on the performance team. That's great. And they're like, well, okay, like if you want to give me more direction, that'd be great. And so I'm like, oh geez, like there's way more I can start thinking into this. And so I think this is also where putting it back on leadership a little bit of like, hey, what would you guys like to see at this? Again, with the operational side, we can reduce technical debt by contributing. The development team should be really excited about that. And so there's a lot to talk about there. But a really great question, focusing on quality assurance and the ROI part of it. Right now, I'm like the people that I'm sponsoring, I've gotten to know them. I trust that they're doing the work. And there's feedback from the community also, right? Like I've gotten people referred who are doing good work. So excellent. Oh, hello, Courtney.
Oh, hello, friend Roger.
Yay.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Courtney Robertson. I am a developer advocate at GoDaddy and also co-founder of the WP Community Collective, where we have budget, but we are also not ready for an influx of people, just as a heads up.
Okay.
We were using Open Collective Foundation. Not part of Open Collective proper, but our financial or fiscal host switched, and so we had to change a lot of things and make programs and procedures. So I'm approaching this from both hats, in a sense. You also have walked the line internally, and I may have referred some amazing contributors your way.
Yes, thank you.
My thinking is more around the realm of in the room, we've got some friends with us that have been contributors for a long time. Some have contributed through different organizations over the time. Also, this is adjacent to Five for the Future. As a project, as the WordPress community, I think I want to hear some discussion, maybe some talking points from you and later from others in the room around, as a project, how do we, each company is going to have its own goals as to why they're doing this. And obviously we believe, you know, I especially was very vocal about get these people in polyglots some money. There are some, we all need this to work in whatever language we speak.
Yeah.
That's an obvious sell. How do we help move the needle on organizations to collaborate together and bring the transparency maybe that a lot of contributors need? I've spoken with some companies that have been big leaders in Five for the Future in the past, and they recognize that in order sometimes to get an initiative through, they just need the groundswell of people to get, like, just onesie-twosie is a thing, but then sometimes you need the groundswell to really get something merged into production or something in one of the teams really launched. One person can go so far, but how far can a group go together? Have you done any conversations around that? If not, let's do a meal like before we leave.
Yeah, no, so great question. And again, I feel like this is similar to the prior question as far as like QA and really the strategic side of sponsoring contributors. We're still new into this, so I'm learning a ton. I am open to all feedback and ideas on how to do this better. I think, but what I'm seeing is just the simple aspect of let's just get organizations in, like, giving money into this. And again, the second order benefit, I feel that this is like more of a second order benefit situation where as we get companies thinking strategically and operationally for contributing, the second order benefits are going to come out of that where we're networking with our competition because we're sponsoring, maybe we're sponsoring the same contributor, right? Yes, we are. Yes, we are, right? So co-opetition, frenemies, whatever you want to call it. I think that's an awesome second order effect that comes from all of this. But first, we just need to get organizations involved in sponsoring contributors and even contributing, right? The next stage that I'm hoping to work on is pushing Kinsta to actually have people contribute more from within the organization. That is a much bigger ask because now I'm not only asking us to give our money to something that we get for free, but we're actually giving our time and resources of people to something that we get for free. And I'm not saying we're totally against it, but again, we hire people for specific roles. Organizations hire people to do a specific job. Unless you're coming into that saying, yes, part of your specific job is to work on WordPress, there's a big change that has to happen from a management level. So boiling the ocean is something that I do love to attempt to do. That is definitely what we're approaching with this topic. But my encouragement out of this talk is start small, just get started, and get the organization starting to see the ROI from doing this. And then as you get into the more advanced situations, having those more strategic conversations should be happening. So I hope that answers your question. We're out of time. Thank you all so much. I really appreciate you coming here. Have a great day.